Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a different kind of battlefield. No raging armies or siege towers, no screaming horns or burning cities. It's just two figures, quiet and slow, standing in the fog of a pale morning, their breath rising like smoke from a calm fire. We're here not for war, but for a duel. You probably wouldn't survive this, not because of the blade, but because of everything else, the weight of the armor, the cold dew in your boots, the endless waiting, and the awkward silence before it all begins. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe it only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me in the comments what time is it where you are, and where in the world are you listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, you are standing on the edge of a small meadow. Mist curls at your feet. The grass is wet and cool, and your boots squish softly as you shift your weight. In the distance, birds begin to chirp, though not quite with confidence. The sky is gray, the kind of gray that doesn't threaten rain, it just wants to rest. There are two men in front of you. One, a local noble with an elaborate mustache and too many feathers on his cap. The other, a wiry knight with a dent in his helmet and no patience for feathers. They haven't spoken yet. They've seen each other, nodded maybe, but no dramatic speeches, just silence. That kind of serious, sleepy silence that comes with knowing something important is about to happen. But no one wants to rush it. You're not here as a knight, though. Not yet. You're more like an observer, or maybe a stand-in, or maybe someone who accidentally got swept up in all this when you were just looking for a place to nap under a tree. Someone hands you a padded vest, then a mail shirt, and a layer of leather, then a steel plate. You nod. You accept it all, not because you're ready to fight, but because this seems like the kind of morning where saying no would be too loud. Everything smells like earth. Oil and old wool. A squire is tying something around. Your wrist, he mutters, a prayer not to win, but just to not make a fool of ourselves today. You agree with him silently. Across the field, a horn sounds. It's not a big trumpet blast, just a soft note, like someone clearing their throat with dignity. This field has seen many duels, some real, some fake, some where no one showed up. The grass. Doesn't care either way, it's just trying to grow. You spot a wooden post in the center, splintered and worn. That's where the herald will stand. He's not here yet. He's probably sipping something warm behind a tree and rehearsing the only 5 lines he needs to say. There's a man painting something on a small shield. A woman nearby is lighting incense. You smell myrrh and maybe rosemary. Someone brought a dog. The dog is asleep, and you're beginning to wonder what a duel really is. Is it about honor? Revenge? Is it a show? A ceremony? A leftover piece of something medieval people never quite finished defining? Historians still wonder if these duels were truly necessary, or just ways to keep peace by letting pride punch itself out politely. But for now, it's just fog, feathers, and footsteps. A crow lands on the post. Someone clears their throat. The mist begins to thin, and somewhere deep inside your armor, under layers of borrowed bravery and too tight boots, you feel your heart slow not out of fear, but curiosity. What does a duel really feel like? You're about to find out. The herald finally arrives. He's not what you expected. No silver trumpet, no grand robes, no deep-voiced proclamation. It's just a middle-aged man in a weathered tunic and soft shoes that make almost no sound on the wet grass. He carries a scroll that's been unrolled and re-rolled so many times, it looks like a sleeping cat curled into itself. He stands at the center of the field, clears his throat again. He's been practicing and begins to speak. His voice isn't loud, but it travels. Quiet words can carry when everyone's listening for them. The rules are short. They always are. The longer the list, the more ways someone might cheat. Both parties must consent. The weapons must be agreed upon. No poison. No ambushes. No magic, though. That rule gets a chuckle from the crowd. They still add it. Just in case. You glance at your opponent. He nods when the herald asks for confirmation. You nod too, though. Yours feels more like a slow blink. There's a moment where the two of you are meant to lock eyes, maybe share a bit of mutual respect. But all you notice is that his gauntlet is newer than yours. He probably hasn't dropped it in the mud 3 times. Like you did, you take your positions. There's a strange calm that settles in once the rules have been spoken. It's like placing a line of salt on the ground and daring the day to cross it. Everyone here accepts that what happens next will follow a pattern older than memory. The duel isn't meant to be a wild flailing of blades. Not here, not today. This is more like ... a dance. One with rhythm, limits, and a kind of tired elegance. Your instructor once told you, it's not the violence that matters. It's the agreement. That was after he hit you in the helmet with a wooden staff. Repeatedly, the herald steps back. Not far just enough that if someone stumbles, he won't get a boot to the knee. You're given a moment to speak, if you want. Tradition allows for a brief statement of intent. Most people say something short. I come with honor. Fight for my name. Let truth decide. You, however, say nothing. Not because you're trying to be mysterious. You just haven't had your tea yet. Your opponent speaks softly. Let the field bear witness. Sounds like something written in a dusty book. But it's sincere. A breeze moves through the trees. The crowd hushes. Even the dog lifts its head, then flops it back down. You both raise your weapons not. Yet to strike, but as a sign. And here's the curious thing. The duel has technically already begun. Not with blades, but with presence. With the silence. With the fact that 2 people agreed to stand here in front of their neighbors and do something very old. Duels weren't always about drawing blood, in many parts of medieval Europe, particularly. Under chivalric codes or town ordinances, drawing first blood might be enough to declare a winner. In other cases, one solid knock to the ground could settle the matter. Death. Rare. Usually discouraged. Too messy. Too permanent, you shift your stance. Not because you're ready to fight, but because your left foot is asleep. The rules also say no one else may interfere. There's no coaches, no clever distractions. No sudden interruptions by a jealous cousin or a disgruntled goose. The herald places a single hand on his chest, bows and backs away fully now. There is no bell, no go. Just a pause, and then life holds its breath. This moment is why the rules exist. To give this silence its shape, without the rules this would just be chaos. But with them, it becomes ritual, ceremony, a strange sort of theater where bruises are acceptable, but sloppiness is not. Historians still debate how seriously these rules were followed. In some towns, they were strict. In others, more like suggestions, whispered politely and ignored completely. But even so, the idea of rules gave the duel its dignity. You grip your weapon. The mist has lifted just enough to see your opponents. Eyes, they don't flash with rage. They're calm, maybe even bored. Like someone deciding which bread roll to choose. And before either of you move, you understand the most important rule of all. This isn't about victory. It's about being. Seen not as perfect, it starts with strong, a creak. It's not from the trees, but as someone willing to stand, or even the field. It's your own shoulder, adjusting under the padded weight of your armor. A low, leathery groan that reminds you you're now wearing more than your own body. Armor it. Turns out, isn't just for fighting, it's for waiting. For breathing carefully. For standing still in a field while the wind shifts around you, and every inch of your clothing tries to remind you how absurdly heavy honor can feel. The first layer was soft. A linen shirt, loose and long. Then came the gambeson, quilted like a padded jacket, thick with wool and sweat from someone who wore it before you. The chainmail was next cold when it touched your arms, whispering like falling coins as it settled over your shoulders. Now, over all of that, rests a steel breastplate, curved like a shallow bowl and polished until it glints in the morning sun. You feel like a well-dressed turtle. Every movement is a decision. Turning your neck, a strategic gamble. A minor event. Your knees click as you shift. Your weight again. The greaves those armored shin guards dig slightly into your calves. You wonder how anyone ever ran in this or sat, or danced, but that's the thing. Armor wasn't just built for combat. It was also a kind of theater. Costume. A stage prop that told the audience who you were, how serious you were, and just how much metal you were willing to haul around in the name of reputation. Your opponent wears something simpler male only. Leather gloves. Practical. You, however, have been dressed by committee. The squire who strapped your cuirass muttered something about impression, which you suspect was code for make the noble look shiny. You raise your arm and the pauldron creaks, not menacingly, more like an old chair settling into itself. Nearby, someone is sketching the scene on a piece of parchment. You catch a glimpse. 2 figures, one upright and gleaming, the other slightly slouched, trying not to sneeze inside a helmet. Guess which one is you? The helmet is still in your hand. You turn it slowly, admiring the fine lines of the visor and the faint dents along the crown. Someone else's story, probably. Maybe a tavern brawl. Maybe an overexcited goat. You'll never know. As you lower it onto your head, the world narrows. Sound dulls. Vision shrinks to a slit. Your breath bounces back against your cheeks, warm and slightly stale. Can no longer see the sky? Only your opponent. The grass. The moment, and then the weight settles fully. Armor doesn't just protect you, it grounds you, makes you slower, forces you to think before every step. And in that slowness, there's a strange kind of peace. It's like being wrapped in a heavy blanket of responsibility. Historians note that armor evolved over time, not just in style or function, but in meaning. For some, it was proof of status. For others, a rite of passage. For many, it was just something to endure. But all of them knew the truth you're learning now. Armor makes you visible, not because it shines, but because it changes. The way you move, and in a duel movement, is everything. You inhale deeply. The air inside the helmet tastes like iron and old cloth. It's oddly comforting. You take a step forward. The plates clink gently like wind chimes in a cathedral. You feel the presence of every buckle, every strap, every rivet, and you wonder quietly, to yourself, if maybe this wasn't built to keep harm out. Maybe it was built to hold fear in. You're reclining now on a wool-stuffed mat someone kindly offered, legs aching slightly in places you didn't know could ache. Your sword rests nearby, leaned against a half-buried stone, its edge as clean as it was this morning. And nearby, a bearded man with a missing tooth is explaining how technically biting during a duel is frowned upon, but not always disallowed. You arch an eyebrow, he continues, chewing on something tough and leaf-shaped. Depends on the town, he says, and the judge. Some say no biting, others say no eye gouging, but most agree, no spitting unless it's poetic. And that right there is medieval logic. Duels had rules, but those rules varied more than soup recipes. Some towns had strict lists, others went with vibes. There were duels judged by priests, duels judged by mayors, duels judged by whoever happened to own a bell loud enough to be heard over the clang of swords in one village. It was said that you could win a duel simply by knocking your opponent out of the circle with a chicken. In another, you had to fight while holding a small loaf of rye under your arm. If you dropped it, you lost. Of course, not all rules were that whimsical. Some duels allowed armor, some didn't, some forbade shields. Others required them, but only if they were painted red. One 14th century text outlines 7 different acceptable stances, 4 kinds of bows, and 2 kinds of apologies, one for show, and one for sincerity. You think of all this as you sip water from a clay cup with a chipped rim. It tastes faintly of onion. It's possibly poetic. Nearby, someone recounts a duel where both fighters tripped at the same time and landed on each other's swords. They were declared co-winners. A tapestry was commissioned. It was reportedly very confusing. What's clear, though, is that medieval combat wasn't lawless chaos. It was ritualoed, inconsistent, sometimes hilarious ritual. The kind of thing that mattered because it was shared. Even if everyone interpreted the sharing differently, you remember earlier. The way your sword met your opponent's with a quiet clink, no blood, No rage, just mutual understanding. That was part of the rules, two unspoken ones, like the rule of the pause, the rule of not striking when your opponent is coughing, the rule of letting someone adjust their belt mid-duel. If it's slipping in a very undignified way, historians sometimes try to codify all of this. They dig through manuscripts, searching for consistency. But what they find is a beautiful mess. 1,000 local customs passed by word of mouth, scribbled in the margins of old scrolls, or just remembered by the oldest person in town who once saw their cousin win a fight with a ladle. You stretch your legs and look up at the clouds. One of them resembles a helmet, another looks like a hand holding a biscuit. The rules were flexible. The people were firm. Somewhere in that contradiction lies the soul of the duel. You ask the bearded man with the missing tooth what the weirdest rule he ever heard was. He doesn't blink. No whistling during the strike, he says, deadly serious. Why? One remembers, but if you did it, they made you start over. You nod. Fair enough. You're standing now in the drawn circle, just a few paces from your opponent. The grass beneath your boots is bent flat, cold from dew and soft from years of footsteps like yours. This patch of earth has felt the nervous shifting of many duelists. It's absorbed pride and panic in equal measure. You're not moving yet. Neither is he. This moment, the one before the first swing, is not about action. It's about presence. The hush before the harp string is plucked. The way air waits before. Thunder. The field itself holds its breath. There's no official signal. It's no loud shout or ceremonial flag. Just a glance, a shift in footing. The slow drawing of breath beneath steel. Your opponent tilts his head slightly, just enough to suggest readiness. You mirror the motion not because you mean to fight yet, but because it feels polite. It's like nodding before a chess game, or before falling asleep in someone else's carriage. In duels like these, the first swing is everything. It sets the tone. Too fast, and you look foolish. Too slow, and you look unsure. There's a tempo to be found, somewhere between urgency and performance. This isn't a tavern brawl. It's a language spoken with wrists and feet. You shift your weight, testing the grass for slippage. The heel of your boot catches briefly on a small divot. A chicken might have stood there last week, or a bored goat. You gently move an inch to the left. Much better. The crowd, if you can call 20 villagers and a very bored dog, a crowd leans in with their silence. One boy holds a wooden sword in both hands, copying your stance. An old woman murmurs something in a language you don't know. The herald has backed away, half-shadowed by a tree. He's already chewing something that looks like a root. You and your opponent slowly begin to circle. The movement isn't about closing in. It's about reading each other. It's not with eyes, but with posture, with the way your shoulders sit beneath the armor, with how your breath clouds the air, with how much twitch lives in your elbows. His sword dips and rises casually. It's not a threat. More like a stretch. Yours stays centered, the tip slightly angled, like a ladle poised over a sleepy bowl of soup. You're not supposed to strike yet. Not really. The first move in most duels was often more of a test than a blow. A feint, a gesture, a question. Are you really here? It asks. Or just wearing the clothes? Your breath fogs your visor briefly. You blink, and it clears. The sword feels slightly heavier now, not in a burdensome way, more like it's reminding you that it exists. That it will go where you send it, even if you don't yet know the full cost of that command. The first step forward happens by accident. You shift your foot, and he does the same. Stuttered mirror. Neither of you retreats. There is something deeply strange about preparing to swing a sword at another person while also feeling a deep, unspoken fondness for them. You don't know him, but you admire him, only because he showed up. He could have stayed in bed. You could have stayed in bed. Instead, here you both are, in a cold field, dressed like metal teapots. Breathing in time. Historians still discuss how much of medieval dueling was performance versus intent. Was it always meant to resolve something? Or was it sometimes just for show, a ritual for cooling blood without letting it spill? They don't all agree, but you do feel something important now that this pause. This pre-swing quiet is perhaps the most sacred part. The duel hasn't begun yet, and yet, somehow it already has. You grip your sword a little tighter. Your knees. Relax. A bird calls from a nearby tree, long and lazy, and then you both move. Not quickly, not sharply, just honestly. Like two actors in a scene that neither of you rehearsed but both know by heart. Your blade meets his with a sound that is not what you expected. It isn't loud, not cinematic or shrill. No sparks fly. It's more like a dull clink like to old spoons tapping gently in a drawer. Just enough to confirm contact. The blades slide apart then again. A little harder this time, clink. There's force behind the movement, yes, but also restraint. The duel has begun, but it is not a fight. Not yet. This is something else. A conversation, maybe. One made of muscle memory and mutual caution. Neither of you is trying to win, not in the way you imagined. You're trying to understand. You step back. He steps forward. Your swords touch again, not slashing. Testing. No one has swung wildly. No one has shouted. It's the quietest duel you could have hoped for. The villagers remain respectfully still. Some of them chew. A few nod appreciatively, like they've seen this before and are pleased that no one is embarrassing themselves yet. You feel your foot? Slide slightly on the damp grass. Your balance shifts. You correct? He notices. Doesn't press the advantage. Just nods. It's a duel, not a hunt. The two of you circle again, slower this time. You raise your sword and step in with a practiced swing, one you remember from months of training. He parries easily. His blade meets yours like a well-rehearsed dance partner. Neither of you flinch. Neither of you fall. It's not disappointing. It's beautiful. It's careful. This isn't about drawing blood. In fact, most medieval duels didn't end that way, especially those overseen by townsfolk or held under local law. They ended when one combatant yielded or stumbled or had their arm grazed just enough to say, "That's enough." Ended in laughter or apology. You wonder if today might be one of those. Your blade lifts again. He matches you. This time the strike is relore, at least intended. The metal rings a little louder this time. A few birds flap away from a tree nearby, then nothing. Silence again. The kind of silence that fills the space. Between questions and answers, you're both breathing a little harder now. But not from exhaustion, from focus. This is concentration. In motion, your armor shifts on your shoulders. You can feel where it will bruise later, slow, spreading ache beneath the leather. You adjust your grip. The sword's hilt is slightly slick. You wonder how many hands it's passed through, how many gentle clashes it's seen, how many duels ended just like this with two people trying not to win too soon. You make another. Pass, he counters. Then he lunges, not hard, not with intent to wound, but with enough force that you need to duck. Your knees bend. The mail shirt pulls against your back. A familiar stiffness creeps up your thighs. You twist to regain balance. Your sword comes up not to strike, but to catch his retreating blade. It hums as it skims across your edge. For a second, the blades stay in contact, parallel, trembling like two tuning forks, unsure of which note to choose. Then release. You both pause. You blink. He adjusts his wrist. You both chuckle, quietly just. Enough to acknowledge that this isn't going quite as planned, but also going exactly as it should. Historians still wonder how many of these so-called duels were planned performances. Some say they were part of festivals, others believe they were local spectacles with an agreed-upon ending. There's little agreement, but many stories. One tale tells of a duel that lasted 6 hours, only because both men kept apologizing and resetting. Another ends with both parties shaking hands and going to lunch together. With their swords still on, you can believe that. Because right now, this doesn't feel like rage or vengeance. It feels like a kind of therapy you breathe slowly. He mirrors your breath. The swords hang at your sides now, not in defeat but in rest, like two musicians pausing between notes. No one is bleeding. No one is shouting. No one is trying to finish anything. This is not a fight to the death. This is a slow, awkward, respectful disagreement between two armored poets, and if you both keep this up, you might never need to draw real blood at all. The village has begun to relax into itself again. The field that was once a stage now returns to being what it was, just a field. A few onlookers drift off toward the market. The dog from earlier has returned and is gently chewing on your scabbard, as if to remind you that life moves on, one bite at a time. You sit on a worn wooden bench beside your opponent, no longer your adversary, just a man with sore knees and a slightly better left hook. The two of you share a silence not born of awkwardness, but of a kind of shared peace, stillness that follows only after one has been fully seen, fully heard, and not broken. The duel is over, but the retelling, that has just begun, because every duel, no matter how small or strange, becomes larger once it's passed through a few mouths and mead cups. The clink of metal becomes thunder. The sidestep becomes a flying leap. The pause for breath becomes a strategic feint. Stories blossom like dandelions in an empty yard, and each version is a little more glorious than the last. You glance over at the man beside you. He's telling a child about the duel already, his hands wide, his eyes animated. In his version, there were 3 dodges, a reversed grip, and something about the wind favoring him like a divine omen. The child gasps. You smile? You're not offended? That's the way of things. In fact, you're already shaping your version too. You'll remember the moment your blade hovered inches from his, the crowd holding its breath. You'll remember the sun breaking through the clouds just as you bowed. You'll leave out the part where your knee cracked like a wet branch, or how your helmet smelled faintly of sheep. Historians often lament this part, the way memory warps the truth. But really, that's what makes history feel alive. Not the facts, but the flavor. The details embroidered over time like a well-worn tunic stitched with the symbols of pride, wit, and just enough exaggeration to keep things interesting. You sip from a small clay mug someone handed you. It's lukewarm and vaguely herbal, but after everything, it tastes perfect. Round you, people are already talking of the next village festival, mummers and pies, and the baker's new daughter, who can supposedly lift a barrel over her head. Life moves forward. The duel has been folded into the day's events like a dream remembered, just enough to smile about. You stand up slowly, rolling your shoulders. You feel looser now, unarmored in every way. The tension you carried here on your back and your jaw, behind your eyes, has been released like steam from a pot. Your opponent claps you once on the shoulder and limps off toward the bread cart. You watch him go. You think there was no victory, and that's what makes it beautiful. It wasn't about proving who was stronger. It was about showing the village that 2 people could face each other with intent and leave with dignity. It was about the performance, the ritual, the quiet. You take one last look at the field. The grass already rising again where you fell. The sword marks vanishing like footprints in soft dirt. The duel is gone, but the story remains. And tonight, when the fire is low and the benches creak beneath the weight of tired villagers, someone will start to tell it again, and you'll sit back and you'll listen. And maybe, just maybe, you'll smile when they get it wrong. You find yourself seated now beneath the wooden awning of a long trestle table, the kind that bends slightly in the middle and bears the scars of countless elbows and spilled stew. The sun has begun its descent behind the tiled roofs, softening the sky to a dusky lavender, and someone has lit the first lantern. Its flickering glow dances against a pitcher of watered wine. A loaf of bread sits between you and an old man with a voice like gravel and warm honey. He's reciting something, maybe a poem, maybe a shopping list, but the rhythm of it is pleasant, and the wine makes it impossible to care which. This is the other half of the duel, the part no one, sketches in the margins, the feast, not a royal banquet, mind you. There are no silver goblets, no roasted peacocks wearing their own feathers, just humble plates. Turnips stewed with onions, bits of salted pork, a wheel of cheese with a crack running down its side like a fault line. You tear off a piece of bread and chew slowly, the crust crackling in your jaw. The softness at the center reminding you that some things endure. There's laughter now. It's not raucous, but steady. A soft hum of contentment. Someone plucks at a stringed instrument. Badly. But everyone nods anyway. You glance around, your opponent is here. Of course, Gleaner somehow, and dressed in a loose tunic the color of moss. He's speaking to a woman who hasn't stopped rolling her eyes, which suggests they may be married. A child is trying on your gauntlet. It swallows their arm entirely, and they pretend to duel a passing cat. The cat wins. This is the afterglow, the time when stories begin to settle like mist over the day. When the tension drains from the shoulders, and everyone remembers, they were never here for blood. They were here to watch something old, something human. The act of disagreement turned into movement. A disagreement that could have been ugly made. Gentle by rules, ritual, and roast turnips. Historians say that feasting after a duel was not universal. In some places, the fighters parted immediately. In others, they were expected to sit and dine as a show of reconciliation. A final display. That said, we leave the field together. Like that. It feels right. You dip your bread in something that might be broth and lean back against the creaky bench. The wood presses into your spine in all the familiar ways. Across the table, a man with no eyebrows is telling an outrageous story about a duel, fought entirely on stilts. You suspect it's nonsense. You also suspect it's true. The fire in the hearth nearby crackles low and lazy. The lanterns bob slightly with the wind. You breathe. No armor, no weapon, just warmth. And bread, the faintest ache in your legs, reminding you that you lived something worth aching for. The story of today is already taking shape in a dozen minds. Some will say it was fierce, others will say it was strange. A few might even say it was boring, but all will agree it happened. And you were part of it, as the stars begin to poke gently through the sky. You lift your cup to your lips once more. It tastes of herbs and smoke and something unnameable. Maybe memory. Maybe peace.
Streetlights hum like a broken hymn. Shadows stretch where the world turns dim. Glass on asphalt whispers sins. The city sighs a heavy breath. Neon veins pulse life and death. Drift, drift, cinematic drift. Night bends, moments twist. Drift, cinematic drift. The world's on pause, we exist. Rain hits hard like a ticking clock. Echoes bounce in the urban block. Time moves slow, then stops. Ghostly voices in the air. Chopped up fragments everywhere. Gritty static. Tensions glare. Drift, drift, cinematic drift. Night bends, moments twist. Drift, cinematic drift. The world's
You're wiping your sword clean when someone mentions the pit fight. You pause, mid-polish. Not because you're surprised, but because it's rare to hear anyone bring that one up with a straight face. Yes, women fought in duels too, though. Not often, and almost never in the way you'd expect. The story goes like this. If a man and a woman had a legal dispute, say, over property or a deeply embarrassing accusation, they could, on rare occasion, settle it through combat. But there were adjustments. The woman would be allowed to wield a stone or a cloth-wrapped weapon, sometimes even a sack of rocks. The man, he had to stand inside a waist-deep pit, armed with a stick. That was the compromise. It sounds like a bad joke, a punchline painted in medieval ink, but it wasn't. At least not entirely. You sit now under a canvas, shade beside the field, chewing slowly through a hunk of bread that's more crust than content, and listen as a merchant recounts the tale of Agnes the tanner's wife, who fought her neighbor's cousin over a boundary wall and won by knocking him into his own. Pit with a broom handle, the crowd had cheered, or so they say. You picture it, the man sinking into the soil, half his pride buried beneath his belt, flailing as the woman stalked around the edges like a hawk in a linen bonnet. It must have been something. These kinds of duels weren't common. They were oddities, edges of the legal map. But they happened. Enough that sketches survive in old manuscripts. Enough that they became part of the folklore of the kind past. Around at taverns, when the fire's low and the bread's gone stale, you wonder how it felt, for her. Not just to fight, but to be allowed to. Not as a novelty, but as a legal equal for, at least the length, of a swing. Historians aren't sure how often women actually participated in duels. Some say it was just symbolic, more for reputation than resolution. Others believe it was used as a final recourse when all other avenues had failed. A gesture of defiance wrapped in the shape of sport. There's even a rumor of a duel between two noblewomen, each wielding daggers and veils, supervised by monks who kept fainting from the scandal of it all. Probably not true. But isn't that the fun of it? Because the thing about medieval duels is that they always walk the line between history and theater. Half law, half legend. A bit of bruising mixed with just the right amount of storytelling. You watch as a few children reenact. The pit fight with sticks and a very nervous goat standing in for the judge. One child, playing the lady, swings a pillow tied to a rope. Another in the pit ducks behind a barrel. Everyone is laughing, no one is hurt. Somehow it all feels exactly right. Duels weren't just about weapons. They were about voice. About having one, using it, proving you could stand your ground even, if that ground was quite literally a hole in the middle of town square. You finish your bread, the crusts tumble to the ground. A chicken pecks at them, unaware that it has just become part of history. 2. And somewhere in your mind, the image of Agnes and her broom lives on, not just as an oddity, but as a reminder that even in an age of swords and silence, some people still found a way to swing back. The sword isn't handed to you like a weapon. It's offered like a question. The squire presents it with both hands, resting it across his palms as if he's carrying a loaf of sacred bread. He doesn't speak, but his eyes say, "This one feels right." And strangely it does. It's not the biggest sword, not the heaviest. In fact, it looks ... modest. The hilt is wrapped in faded leather. The guard curves like a quiet smile. And the blade has a faint shimmer, not polished, just clean. Used real, you take it. It's not cold. Not warm either, just ... neutral. Like it's waiting to find out who you are. You've held practice swords before, wooden ones, dull ones that wobbled like tired breadsticks. This is different, balanced, subtle, when you raise it slightly. The tip doesn't shake. It just points, as if it already knows where to go. Somewhere behind you, a bard hums, maybe not on purpose. Maybe the sword just brings music into the world by existing. You've read poems about swords, songs about famous blades, with names like Oathkeeper and Frostfang and Knight's Truth. this one doesn't introduce itself. It simply is. You get the sense it doesn't need a name to do its work. Your opponent is also handed a sword. His is heavier, thicker at the base, built for broad swings, for power over grace. He tests the weight with a flick of the wrist, then nods. Not to you, to the sword. And for a moment, it feels less like a duel and more like a literary reading. Two people showing each other the lines they've memorized, stories they've chosen to tell. Swords, after all, weren't just forged. They were fashioned, meant to reflect their owner, meant to outlive them. There were swords passed down, through families buried with lords, stolen in taverns, or hidden under chapel floors. Some had legends attached. Others had none, yet were just as deadly. Historians sometimes debate whether certain famous swords even existed, or whether they were invented for ballads and bedtime stories. But the metal, that was always real. The weight in your hand is real. You. Move your arm gently, letting the blade describe a small arc in the air. It hums slightly, or maybe that's your imagination. The blade is long enough to matter, but short enough to manage. You won't be swinging wildly. This is a duel, not a tavern riot. Each move will be measured, observed, interpreted like punctuation. The sword is your sentence. You test the grip again. Fits your hand in that way? Only something old and well used can. It wasn't made for you. But it has decided you're good enough for today. The squire watches your face. You offer a small nod. He bows as if acknowledging your reply to the question he asked without speaking. Your opponent's sword glints in the morning light. Yours remains matte, almost modest. One sword sings. The other growls. You wonder what kind of story this will be. Not one of death, surely. That's too dramatic. It's too final. Maybe something simpler. A short poem, 2 blades, 4 feet, a little fog, the softest possible violence. The armor is off now, piece by piece, and you're finally breathing like a regular person again. Your shoulders ache with a mail shirt dug in. Your thighs hum with the memory of greaves that pinched slightly every time you bent your knees. And your neck. Well, your neck feels like it briefly supported a cathedral bell. Whoever told you armor was glorious clearly never wore it past noon. Someone helps. You tug the last buckle free, and the padded arming doublet beneath releases a faint, sick hers, or it's hard to say. You stretch your arm slowly, careful not to pull anything vital. The cool air hits your sweat-damp sleeves like a blessing from an invisible saint of breeze. The truth? Armor wasn't built for comfort. It was built for survival. Everything else style, intimidation, looking like a walking bronze statue, was just a bonus. You glance down at the pieces scattered near your boots. The breastplate curved like a proud tortoiseshell. The pauldrons, those shoulder guards that make you feel like a rooster trying to look bigger than it is. The gauntlets, stiff and stubborn like elderly badgers, all heavy, all loud, all absolutely necessary. If someone was swinging a blade your way, but not convenient, there's a common myth still. It's floating around like dandelion fluff that knights could barely move in their armor. They had to be hoisted onto horses. With cranes, if they fell over, they lay there, like overturned beetles, waiting for God or gravity to intervene. Historians love correcting this. Most armor was surprisingly mobile, especially the well-made sets. You could run, roll, even climb. But none of that made it pleasant. Wearing armor was like being inside a musical instrument that didn't want to be played, creaked, groaned, and occasionally clanked in ways that made birds fly off and small children cry. Still, it worked. You sit now in a long shirt, sipping something warm from a wooden mug. Your arming cap sits nearby, steam still rising faintly from its cloth. You rub your fingers together, remembering how stiff they felt inside the metal gloves, like your hands were impersonating puppets. There were entire manuals devoted to putting armor on correctly. Squires trained for years to get it right. One wrong strap could mean the difference between deflecting a sword and accidentally turning your chest into a target. Some knights even had favorite sets like lucky boots, but heavier and more likely to knock over furniture. You look over and see your opponent doing the same, slowly unlatching buckles, rolling shoulders, flexing fingers that pop and crack like old bread crust. You exchange a small nod. It's the universal, "my knees are killing me" nod, and despite it all, you understand why armor mattered, not just as protection, but as ritual. Putting it on was a process, a meditation. It's a way of saying, today I do something serious. And taking it off meant you had lived through that seriousness. You had earned your sweat and could finally feel the breeze again. Historians still debate the true weight of some sets, whether they varied by region or by wealth. Some say 20 kilos, others claim more. But most agree, it was never light. And it was never casual. You stand now, stretching carefully. The stiffness giving way to that peculiar floating sensation, like you're still armored in spirit. But the weight is gone, and maybe that's how it was meant to feel. Heavy when worn, lighter when remembered. The crowd hasn't moved much. They stand at a safe distance, gathered loosely like laundry pinned out to dry, swaying gently with the breeze and murmuring just above a whisper. Some have brought small stools. One woman is balancing a cup of something steaming on her lap, stirring it occasionally with a carved stick. Another man nods slowly on a piece of brown bread, so dense it could be used as a shield. These are not bloodthirsty spectators. They are sleepy, mildly interested villagers who showed up because someone said there'd be a duel. And that sounded more entertaining than sweeping the cottage again. A boy near the front squints at you, then turns to his mother and mutters something about how you move like a tired chicken. She hushes him, but not without a smile. You feel a little seen. Duels were public events, often encouraged to happen in public. That was the point, to have witnesses.
Not to impress them with drama, but to let everyone see that things were being settled properly, peacefully if possible.
Respectfully, ideally. Most importantly, visibly. Honor, after all, doesn't exist in private. It lives in other people's memories. Your opponent backs up a step, not out of fear, but to catch his breath. You do the same. No one seems surprised. The duel is less a clash of titans and more a long, sigh-filled walk with occasional metallic high-fives. From the crowd, someone begins humming a familiar tavern tune. A soft rhythm spreads as others join in, barely above a mumble, just enough to form a kind of sleepy soundtrack. Even the herald starts tapping his scroll against his leg in time. There's a dog now. It's definitely not yours. It has wandered into the outer edge of the circle and lies down, tail thumping once or twice before curling up beside someone's basket. It watches you both with heavy-lidded eyes, not judging, just present. You and your opponent circle again. There's less tension now. The crowd has seen the rhythm. They're no longer leaning forward. They're relaxing into the pace. This isn't the climax of an epic tale. This is page 47 of a book you read by candlelight, where nothing explodes but someone. Pours soup with great care. You feint to the left. He tilts right. The swords kiss and part. A child claps once. It stops. I'm sure if it's allowed. You lower your blade and glance at the crowd. They nod at you, not in applause, but in thanks, because you're doing what so few people ever get to. You are enacting fairness. Gently, openly, while everyone sips broth and minds their boots. Historians sometimes joke that medieval duels were less about victory and more about display. The way two people could engage each other and still step away whole was a kind of moral theater, show of restraint as much as skill. Your opponent fumbles slightly and lowers his sword, motioning with a gloved hand for a pause. You nod grateful. He walks to a small wooden post at the edge and picks up a cloth, wipes his forehead, drinks from a jug someone passes him. You do the same. It's not often to duelists hydrate mid-duel. It happens. The crowd murmurs again. Someone mentions the weather. Another complains about goose prices. You're still at the center of it all. But somehow the duel has melted into the village's day like tea into warm bread. And in that, there's something strangely perfect. Because what could be more medieval than a battle, politely interrupted by snacks? You return to the circle, your feet finding their way back through slightly flattened grass. Your breath steady now, calmer than before. Your sword hangs at your side like it's grown heavier, not from strain, but from understanding. This isn't about victory anymore. It might never have been. Your opponent re-enters too, a few drops of water still clinging to his chin from his brief drink. He looks at you through his visor, then nods. It's not a grand gesture, not a challenge. More like, thank you for not trying too hard. There's something deeply human about the way you two are now moving. No more lunges, no more flourishes. It's just simple exchanges. Soft deflections. Controlled steps. You think, maybe this isn't a duel. Maybe it's a quiet pact. One that says, I will not humiliate you. Please don't humiliate me. One that says, let's remember this for the right reasons. There are no official rules about this feeling. Of course, the herald doesn't read it from the scroll. It's not written into town law or engraved on your sword hilt. But every true duelist knows it. Somewhere after the first clash and before the final bow, this understanding slips into the air. It's not surrender. It's respect. He swings wide, but not too wide. You meet him halfway, sword glancing against sword. The metal sings briefly, like a bell that knows better than to ring too loud. Then stillness. You lower your arm. He does too. The crowd shifts again, not with excitement, but with appreciation. Like they're watching two old friends share a memory they don't quite understand. There is no applause, no trumpet. It's just a long moment where nothing is asked of either of you. The dog stands up, stretches, then walks off as if its work here is done. Historians sometimes forget this part of the story. They remember the start of the duel and the end. The challenge and the outcome, but not the middle. The middle is quiet, awkward, personal. The middle is where the truth lives. You take a small step forward, then stop. You're not advancing, just breathing with your legs. Your sword is still up, but it feels ceremonial now. It's like holding a lantern at the edge of a path neither of you plans to walk. He mirrors you again. There's that rhythm in spoken, mutual, oddly peaceful. If someone were to paint this moment, they'd miss the details. The way the sun warms only the tops of your pauldrons. How a tiny beetle crawls along the tip of your boot. How the crowd is now more interested in their bread than your blades. But you'd remember, and so would he. Because this, right now, is the most dangerous thing of all. Kindness in the shape of a duel. The agreement is nearly complete, not signed. Not sealed, but performed. Shared. Worn like armor. Too soft for the battlefield, but too strong to ever leave behind. You raise your sword just once more. He does the same. Then you bow. A slow, creaking metal-clad bend of the back. Not because someone said to, but because it feels right, he bows too. The duel is over, and neither of you had to win. You've barely taken off your gauntlets when someone mentions the phrase, trial by combat. And you nearly laugh into your water jug. Not because it's funny, but because people never quite picture it right. It wasn't always about noblemen, in polished armor, battling for honor under banners and trumpets. Sometimes it was two peasants in muddy tunics, swinging at each other with clubs the size of fence posts, while the village priest nervously clutched a scroll and hoped no one broke their neck too early. You've seen one of those before? Not in a story. Not in a legend. You saw it, or maybe dreamt it. You're not sure anymore. Either way, it was early morning, and the ground was still soft from last night's rain. To men one short and scowling, the other tall and anxious met in the square between the bakery and the well. The issue? A boundary stone, a piece of rock no bigger than a sheep's head, which had allegedly shifted 6 inches during the previous spring floods. Both men insisted it belonged to their field. Neither trusted the other to measure honestly. They brought out clubs and prepared to let their arms do the talking. The village elder watched with a pained sort of politeness, holding a thin stick that served no purpose other than to point at the winner when the time came. He never used it. Both men fell into the mud within 10 minutes and didn't rise for another 15. The matter was settled later over broth and shared embarrassment. That's the truth of trial. By combat more realish than real, often dramatized, frequently messy, and rarely the neat, noble scene painted in tapestries or bedtime tales. You've heard other stories too. A woman accused of theft who demanded a duel to prove her innocence, sand one when her opponent slipped on a chicken. Man who hired a better fighter to take his place, only to be fined afterward for overpreparedness. One tale tells of a German fencing manual that included rules for fighting while seated on barrels, presumably for when both combatants had gout. Historians debate how often trial by combat was legally binding. Some say it was a last resort, only invoked when the courts had no clear answer. Others suggest it was performative, more social theater than real justice, a way for communities to release pressure without causing a riot. You suspect they're both right. You sit now on a wooden bench near the edge of the field. A local girl offers you a bowl of something that might be soup or porridge. You nod and accept. She watches you eat with wide eyes, as if trying to imagine what a duel tastes like. Your sword rests on your knees, still sheathed, still silent. It didn't draw blood, but it drew something else. Attention, curiosity, the kind of story people carry home in their pockets like warm stones. You ask about the stone fight. Someone chuckles, says it happened again last year. Only that time it was two sisters in a frying pan. Trial by combat was never about killing. It was about convincing the world that you believed in your truth enough to risk a bruise for it, and just maybe that you were good at swinging something heavy without falling over. The field behind you is quiet now, but the stories echo not loud, not proud, just enough to make you wonder what else people used to believe could be solved with a swing and a prayer.